skip the tearjerker one for now.
Except that one. Hate that one.
Right. Okay, this is the where do you get your ideas one. It's for films and videos.
You know, I had an idea about that one. That maybe like that would be a good one. It could like be dropping light bulbs, you know, dropping light bulbs on the ground. You know, kind of that light bulb symbolic for an idea, and you could like be bouncing them around. Think that'd be a good idea?
I think that would be kind of nice. In a clean white room or something, yeah.
Well, even on a nice concrete pad, you know, so you'd like...
I think it'd be kind of nice and close up, that's true.
I get my ideas at the store.
Well, do you think, I guess, I could ask another question, then do you think that there is like a particular time for collecting ideas? Like I'm getting this a little bit with the notion that, oh golly, maybe I should be doing some writing, you know, just like kind of sitting down at the computer terminal and then just writing whatever comes in my head that I think are ideas. So of course it's different than like a journal entry or something. But I mean, you actually, what do you think of that notion of like, oh well, one's going to be creative. Like it seems like you need this germ to make a plant, so you can start messing with the soil and watering it, and you know, all this other stuff that's fun. Although the idea part seems to, at least for me anyway, it has no particular procedure. I mean, there's a procedure to go about building a soundtrack or to relate footage to a series of sounds and words, but I have no procedure for coming up with ideas.
Well, yeah, it seems to me like there are different, I don't know if it'd be different levels of ideas or different types of ideas. You know, like the total raw ones, the ones that a lot of times don't make any sense when they first pop up, you know, a little phrase or whatever, so, yeah, much like a dream fragment. You know, you just like myself, I just like write usually on matchbooks. Just write, you know, a little piece of scrap paper, whatever's handy, just write down some raw kernel.
But that it doesn't stem then from being like in a just as an exercise. You're not like in a idea creation stage. It's not like you said, well, for the next 2 hours I'm going to think about ideas.
No, not those kind. Although a lot of times you might have one floating around there that, you know, you could kick loose by forcing it. You know, you might have a couple kernels in there, you know, in your memory, so to speak. You'd trigger them out, but for the most part, no, they just like come on their own. And then, you know, like the different levels, you could look at that as being a little more forced, like, okay, I've got this kernel, and now the idea is to make something out of it, and then you sort of kind of pull little tactical methods, I suppose, out of your bag of tricks.
Oh God, are you taking me to the park?
No, I was just going to the
First.
thing.
I just don't know. See what time it is. It's 10 to 5. Maybe 5:30, maybe 5.
And where the hell are these
Roamers over to the 4Bs.
Oh,
But is that one, is she injured or is she just practicing cross-country skiing now?
maybe she's practicing being injured.
There, I should just point out the access center thing.
Let's
take
these.
Which is somewhere down there. In Kent. Alright, here's your other question though. Do you see humor as an element in your work?
Absolutely not.
There you go. Large on there.
That was a short one.
Oh my God, I learned an interesting tidbit about the downtown preacher, you know, the guy that stands at the street corners. Apparently he's in trouble for having married a 29-year-old man and a simultaneously. It's in some kind of statutory rape problem stemming from too much absorption of the good news kind of a thing.
Too much absorption of good news.
Well, I guess he saw this real Christian foundation for this unholy triangle that he formed. And, they all consummated the marriage, like, pretty soon after the ceremony.
It's on the corner, right?
Yes, sir. It's cleaning up. See that car here? Sound. I turned the sound off. Do you see humor as an element in your
None of
work?
the stuff we've shown so far?
No, just before I went in to get the car.
Ask me that when I get, please.
Do you see humor as an element in your work?
Oh, absolutely.
Why make videos? Why are they important to you?
Well, I'm not so much sure that it's the videos that are important, but I mean, right now with present technology, I think it's probably one of the richest mediums that an artist can work in and still, still have access to an audience or have a product that audiences would have access to. It's got your sight, sound, time, motion thing. Oh, it's not quite all there, but there's quite a bit there.
Give us your opinions, response regarding computer technology and its use with video.
Well, personally, have had limited access to that sort of thing. They seem like great tools. A lot of the entirely computer-generated stuff that I have seen, it's nice, but there's something kind of sickly about it or something. I don't know whether it's sort of a form, I suppose, of surrealism of sorts. There's something very unreal about it. It's home reality.
Any influences which enter your work?
In terms of, I guess, media, I try to not to be influenced by things of a similar form. It tends to be fairly parrot-like. Other forms, selling poetry, painting, medieval illumination making, things like that. They're nice paradigms. Now I have to go to work here. Work.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, we're gonna clean up here.
Gotta make ends meet. Came up with the fabulous homos yesterday. Kind of like these guys have just moved to town only because one of them has a job teaching at the university. So this is the deal. So they've come here to Montana. You can see it's kind of cold, somewhat desolate. Even the dogs have something to say about it. Do you worry, in any respect, about the notion of the limitations, I guess, of provincialism? You feel like, when you think about influences, and when you think about influences and living in an area that has kind of a marked lack of current influences.
Well, do you think that question's even applicable in terms of video?
Well,
I mean, is there really such a notion in that medium? Oh, God.
Oh, you mean that it has...
Snails are chowing down on those things. Like weird these little cubes, they're like they've got food embedded in them, they sort of dissolve.
And the snails eat it?
Well, see that one down there? There's a couple. It was last time I was here.
All right, you're saying does video art really have enough of a history that it's got a dialogue running through it, like this Burtonist painting history, for instance?
There's that, and then there's also the notion that television signal can pretty much go anywhere.
Yeah, but would we really see, for instance, the cutting edge video stuff is just part of the airwaves around here, or pop downtown and see, on each weekend or something, some kind of venue for new video work? No.
Granted, of course, that's probably the fine arts' fault. The people that are running that seem to be quite terrified of the video medium, so they're not going to open up their gallery for anything other than the object of art, the fine piece of furniture,
The saleable item.
What is your definition of art? Do you have one?
Yes, I do have one. I feel like art must be a kind of organized statement of feeling or thought. There has to be, for me anyway, a certain packaged interval to it. It can't simply be a randomness. I like the idea of randomness with afterthought. I think for me the art interval must be, if it is a series of accidents that are mediated by hindsight, and there must be almost sort of like having a guest. Making a piece of art is like having a guest. Without some sense, some acknowledgement that there is indeed a guest. It is kind of a guesswork enterprise, and it's almost a kind of rudeness. Especially as there's sort of a proliferation of education, a proliferation of artists and information. There's just so much competition for one's attention that it essentially seems rude to engage in information without some sense of hindsight or preparation. And that sensibility to me, and that in its broadest terms, is what I would consider art.
Her blinking battery here. Joel, could you tell me where you got the idea for the piece Tearjerker?
Oh yeah, Tearjerker. Well, I got the idea for Tearjerker by attending a fully impaneled Senate subcommittee hearing in the state of Montana on the desirability of repealing the sodomy law in the state of Montana. The current law holds for a $20,000 fine or 10 years imprisonment if convicted on such a charge, which is somewhat indistinguishable distinguishable from various forms of bestiality. I believe goats were excluded. It was a very long hearing that went on for about 2 or 3 hours, and I was struck by the fervor with which people opposing the repeal of the sodomy statute had fixated their energies on particular sexual acts. It seemed to me that they had an extraordinary curiosity about them, and that it had filled their minds with a great deal of longing and loathing, I suppose, a very definite approach avoidance conflict. I think Tearjerker was also influenced by the Henry James, The Turned Screw, in which a governess sent to take care of 2 children in the country is faced with this terrible dilemma of trying to determine whether the children under her charge are innocent, but in determining whether they're innocent or not, she would have destroyed their innocence. So it was this kind of level of trying to put myself in the other person's moccasins for a moment, and trying to imagine someone believing in their heart of hearts that they've been charged by God to protect the people around them from something as insidious, invidious, and difficult to control as thought itself. And I thought, what a tremendous burden this would be, and how would someone respond to it, and how eventually thinking about the problem of sexual desire is the problem of sexual desire, and that someone caught in this trap would probably have no choice but to begin a series of rather eccentric rituals in a private corner of their house to cleanse themselves, to engage in confessional, and to prepare themselves to go on for the next onslaught of protection against evil in all its contemporary forms.
Tell me, if you could, the idea. Oh, wait a minute. It's not an idea. Something else. Ah. Tell us, if you would, how the video piece Tearjerker came about.
Oh, that!
Yes, that.
Tearjerker was somewhat inspired by my attendance of a sodomy repeal hearing in the capital of the state of Montana, in Helena, that I attended about 2 years ago. There was impaneled a Senate subcommittee hearing to hear the merits or dismerits of repealing a statutory law that required a 10-year imprisonment for being convicted of sodomy. There were people testifying on both sides. The most strident and notable groups seemed very strongly fixated on a sexual component of human behavior, and as it related to laws, both mutable and immutable. And I, at the time, was very struck by the sincerity of the people that were testifying against repealing the sodomy statute. It seemed to me that it would be worthwhile to put oneself in their shoes and really try to imagine what it would be like if you felt that there were so many strong pernicious influences that could possibly adversely affect your children or your marriage or your everlasting life. Tearjerker was an attempt to put myself in the mind of someone that was trying to act as a filtration device for everyone around them, someone that was living in a society that was made hostile by free love in all of its insidious forms. And I felt that the most likely outcome of what would seem to be a very strong approach avoidance conflict, in which thinking about desire was just as bad as trying to ward off desire, was one and the same thing, that this could lead to a kind of neurosis or spirituality, take your choice, in which someone would have to set up a confessional area in their home where they would need to vent these feelings that couldn't be expressed to anybody else, that they might need an imaginary friend or God or saint to whom they could confide all of their problems to. I can't imagine that this is the state of the competition for the ADA. No rule here. Oh yeah, maybe I should test it. Manual. Yeah, just give me a test.
Test, 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 test,
Okay.
test.
It's really hot. Good.
I think I should be looking through the camera. Well, I guess the main thing is you're just looking at the back of my head, right?
Yeah, and then the front of your head's on the monitor.
So it's not so important, but I should probably maybe look at the camera.
Yeah, the question is, how do you go about making a video? Technical aspects, organization, randomness.
Well, ideally, when we go about making a video, we have some idea in mind to start with, some picture of what we're trying to achieve. However, it doesn't always turn out like that. Sometimes just sort of like take a side road, follow something that looks promising. But for the most part, it's a building process from one point to the other. You get something that you like, and then you try to take it somewhere, and hopefully you'll get there.
Okay, I'll just ask another one. Why not?
Why not, indeed? I feel like my right eye is twitching.
Give us your opinion on the present state of the arts and/or its relation to entertainment.
That's an interesting juxtaposition. The present state of the arts. Well, I feel a bit reluctant to speak on that, at least, from any sort of assumed authority, being as removed from it as I am. Very little intercourse with the arts, per se. But it seems to me, if I remember right, when I was involved in it, they were sort of at a crisis point about what to do next with I guess the end of the avant-garde, or the boredom that came about with avant-garde things, this sort of avant-garde to be avant-garde. Oh, that is a tough one.
Give us your opinion on the present state of the arts and/or you could go just ignore the present state of the arts and assume there is one and speak to its relation to entertainment.
What was the question again?
Give us your opinion on the present state of the arts and/or its relation to entertainment.
Well, I feel somewhat unqualified to speak with any sort of authority about what the present state of the arts are, as I don't really feel like I'm involved in them much anymore. I remember thinking as a painter that basically what was going on here was making of some sort of spiritual furniture, which, I don't really mean anything bad by that. It's just that, you were concentrating on a particular object, and you became a manufacturer of sorts, and you would put your ideas and everything. Oh shit, that's like everything else.
It is. It's a theory about it being that the difference, if one wanted to take the approach, for instance, that painting, printmaking, and
Oops.
I lost sculpture.
Yes.
It had some kind of inherent, inherent bugaboo about them, and that would be, I suppose, its possessional and object character. I mean, you could make that case that video work, as a work of the populace, is almost, Marxist in that sense that it is communal property. I mean, even the ideas of home entertainment are copyrighted, and they've got those dopey warnings about duplication.
Oh, so like the whole rare artifact.
Yeah, the rare artifact
is all the shit.
It's totally blown to shit, even in its kind of je ne sais quoi specificity, because when you make a piece of video, you have no idea, within a certain random pattern how it's even going to be seen. What type of playback equipment it's going to be shown on, whether the color guns of the video projector have been aligned just right. A lot of those characteristics, the specialness of the object is completely removed. Not just its object commodity value, like in an art market, like this particular Brancusi is now worth $12,000 and was worth $6,000, but the guy's dead. And then you have to have the object, have enough room to show the object, so that a lot of art object making becomes a natural consequence in its patronage of wealth. I mean, that is its natural and only audience.
That's one of the, I think one of the nice things about that would be the kind of natural poetry that would, sort of reverberate off a particular person's circumstance, of where they were, or how they saw that. So like if they're living a little trailer over on the north side, watching something on a shitty old TV in their shitty old living room. There's a natural poetry there that really, that sort of rings true. Whereas I suppose same could be true if you had a Picasso hanging up in that same trailer, and painting's nice, but God, I hate that rug. Deal.
But it is sort of like an outgrowth of the Campbell soup can. That it's art for the masses, the video stuff. That it can take so many different forms. It can be satellited. It can be cabled. It can be taped.
Pop art, neo-pop art.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that the content has that necessary uniformity, but that the experience of digesting the content is cheap and it's ubiquitous, like that. And it sort of belies a specificity of presentation because you just can't get it unless you're having a very fancy gallery installation, which you're running around checking all of the color guns and the angles at which monitors are seen.
I'm sure there are people that would do that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there are. But in a kind of broadcast mode, video art is entertainment. I mean, it disguises itself as entertainment, perhaps. But I kind of find the question, the state of art and its relation to entertainment, that there is some kind of dichotomy there. Like you were telling me 10 years ago about being a moral Nazi. Oh, why make art? It doesn't have any social utilitarian value. So that entertainment, is in this bad category, is empty calories of some sort, a nutritional value, and then art is high protein in this mixture or something like that. But I think there's an argument for that, but I think that the dichotomy is not at all clear cut, in at least a bit.
I think in a way that's sort of been a yardstick for evaluating stuff. The talk about, I guess the common denominator factor in entertainment. I don't think being able to speak to that common denominator is necessarily exclusive of something more refined or would the word be recondite?
Right. Or the other way around.
Something a little more obscure. Like two people of diverse interests. Perhaps, one might be... And of course, it is sort of a chauvinism to think that fine art is the realm of the more intellectually refined than
you're more, I guess, more what? Yeah, the common person.
Joe and Jane's six-pack.
Joe and Jane's six-pack.
It's crap.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't know that there is such
seems kind of naughty to
war.
think of it in those terms. But I mean, there's a certain stuffiness of intellect involved with the notion of fine art that, entertainment's just good, clean fun.
Right, and also that it sort of puts art, I think, on a supposedly moral higher plane. People running around accusing art of being a particular religion, of the overeducated and lost. It kind of plays into that stereotype of the artist, that art is their religion. Like, why are you working this marginal job and not pursuing a career? Well, I have my devotions to attend to, which is the art-making process. But that people...
Which doesn't seem to be particularly rational. I mean, really.
No.
It's more a compulsion. And
right.
There's nothing you can do about it. It's a sickness, if you will.
Yeah, and that whole relation to disease of the mind and beauty.
I don't feel well.
Fascinating.
I'll ask a leader question on it, too.
Yes.
Do you see any relationship or connection between video and other forms of art, like painting, or printmaking, or sculpture?
Yes. Funny you should ask that. I do. And this is my theory about our process in this regard. Thinking about the world of abstract expressionism, at least my impressions of it are this way. That painting, evolving along with the burden of its own history as not a history coming out of utilitarian purpose to depict things which other people can recognize, valorize, give adoration to. That this burden of fulfilling this function not only freed up by methods of photography, but that a complex set of not only rules but sensibility was surrounding fine art painting around the time of abstract expressionism. My take on this is that someone could engage in an act of painting that was a physical act that was conducted under different circumstances of mood, and somehow then reflected a sense of mood or sentiment through what seemed to be a history of gestures laid down against a very burdenous yet sensitive history of painting sensibility. Something like this, something like having a particularly tuned piano, let's say, or harpsichord or harp, in which the strings were all very sensitive, and that the strings, even when plucked, it was a harpsichord, an instrument that became so well-tuned over the years in its refinements, in its sensibilities, in its rule-making, that eventually it became tuned unto itself, so that the abstract painter, gesticulating any way that they wanted to, emotionally or even intellectually, would always come up with a song or program that was in tune. Now, I sort of disagree with that. I can't almost believe that to be the case, even though this is my take on it.
Let me see if I get this straight.
All right.
You're comparing abstract expressionism to a harpsichord?
Yeah, to a harpsichord whose strings have become so finely tuned, it's almost like, capoing a guitar or finely tuning a guitar. I think that had a certain validity to an extent, but that what it really seemed to be able to operate on a number of principles that were interesting about it, and this is how I feel we fit in, is that we work in a pre-recorded medium, so that generally the projects that we do are not, they are performative intimately related. Like the performance we undertake at the time may be important, but we are rarely aware that the performance we're undertaking at the time is important.
Well, at least in the particular way that it maybe ends up being important.
Right. Like we record a song. The song is not for a particular recorded action of video. It's not like we're scoring a song to particular visuals. Or the visuals are not created with any sense of spoken text or dramatic text that may accompany them. It seems like each area, the text writing, the soundtrack making, and the visual production all actually take place with a slight reference to one another while they are taking place. It is point at one, so that the intentionality of each component as a component is never actually coming into play in any strict set of rules. We're simply operating within a sensibility. And then the other thing about pre-recording things is that we have the ability to record stuff under so many different contexts and under so many different moods. Playing a keyboard while you're extremely tired, so that you're forming patterns that you may not have come up with before, and you're not willfully coming up with them, or dragging a camera into all sorts of aspects of your private life, and then just sort of using it on the spur of the moment. Those elements, in its pre-recorded nature, have a performance characteristic to them that is not known at the time, and that is selected after the fact. I'm saying this is related to abstract expressionism. Go figure it.
I don't know where the damn harpsichord comes in. I gotta take a peek at that.
This is like the pre-roll.
Re-roll.
Back at it.
Well, I suppose we should talk about particular pieces.
Right.
Like. Well, let's talk about Good Witch. Yeah.
Good
Let's talk
Witch.
about the Good Witch.
Tough one.
What was what would that be in our code? That would be a O. God, I can't remember this stuff. It'd be OOORJ.
Yeah, that's right.
And we are like working on the poem thing. You had the kernel of the idea. This is what
That's
we
right.
need,
I
like
had an idea about some kind of
happy city or something.
happy city with the really a benign dictatorship.
The benign female dictatorship.
Yeah, that's right.
Good Witch.
I think it was really influenced by the Beatles. The Fool on the Hill. That was kind of, for some reason, it was shot in San Francisco. I was thinking hill, kind of a thing. And I was getting kind of this cross-channel thing. I remember coming back from that trip and being in the other studio basement, and I was having this kind of cross-channel mix in my brain of the Fool on the Hill and the windmills of your mind. They're just kind of mixing together. I know it's true. I did mention to you, all these people running around these masks. Wouldn't this be like a nice Law and Order sort of thing? What if this were the structure of a society, or something like that? Because it was Halloween in San Francisco on Market Street, and that's why there were so many people so involved in the Halloween scene.
I remember that. Well, the image I was getting too from the initial description, something about Jesus being the Good Witch on The Wizard of Oz, coming down with her little wand and outfitting everybody with ruby slippers. Although that's not how it happened in the movie, is it? Got them from the Bad Witch.
Right. But there is that wand element, when the gal that's dressed up as the dead Donizetti has that big kind of turgid dildo, and then the Good Witch in there is actually, she's got her wand and saying something like grow or something to the poor
Well, yeah, that
dead penis.
the that feller dressed up as the Good Witch, that was right out of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
I'd have to say.
That's
Very
right.
close.
Don't really know where the nun came. Well, that element, okay, Good Witch does have some element that you're familiar with, which you call the frozen actor. Maybe you'd like to speak to the frozen actor.
Maybe.
Possible.
Yes. The cast of characters. That was quite a collection to choose from. I mean, there were, it was like a bunch of people auditioning for a limited number of parts because there were so damn many characters. And I remember going through that selection process. Like I said, I was feeling like I was afraid I was going to hurt some feelings, even though that was just a videotape.
Well, that I think is some element too, though. I think it plays.
Silly thing.
I'm gone. Bring me back. Bring me back. I'm
There's
back.
tape in there. I'm hitting the button.
Well, be that as it may.
Flashing all kinds of weird
Date is out.
battery with a there's a tape in it, but it ain't going. Oh my
Heck.
Don't you look lively.
Oh yeah. Okay. One thing I was going to say about the frozen actor creed and that or method of working, and that's like taking found footage. Even if we're finding it, it still relates to me anyway to the notion of this indirect character of usage. Like I'm in San Francisco and I take pictures of people on the street. I am just doing it for sheer surface value. Like, oh, there are all these people on the street. And then within a piece like The Good Witch, through repetition and montage, what are off-the-cuff gestures by people that have no intention related to the world of video art or anything, are made to stand for and to perform like actors with a script, or doing the same sort of thing with home movie footage, like My Imaginary Irish Grandmother. That it's the same, even when we're doing it, there's a lack of intentionality. Even when we're the camera people, it's not as if we're specifically telling people, oh, grab this and do this, or, these are your lines and this is your motivation. It's not making a photo.
Well, can you think of anything that we've done that has been like that? I mean,
The only one is
Tearjerker.
Tearjerker. Tearjerker is the only scripted performance.
And even that,
we've done.
I couldn't leave that one alone. It's like, okay, some of the acting, the acted passion got to be, I don't know, made me uncomfortable, at points. And I thought, well, I'm going to fuck with that. Got to fix that somehow. And then, of course, the never-ending fade-out song.
Right, which really changes Tearjerker from... Because I think what that does is that it makes Tearjerker have kind of a self-conscious relationship, because there's absolutely no motivational reason for this music to be coming from anywhere. So it puts the performer in a self-conscious relationship with the technical process itself, because they're just being hit with music. So it's sort of being done with this awareness, not necessarily that this actress is playing a part of this woman. I mean, or rather, with a supreme acknowledgement of that I am an actress playing this woman, and I'm responding to this fake prop off stage somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's funny though, because that wasn't even there. I mean, she didn't hear the music.
Right, that's true.
And
she was told that was going to be the impressionistic sounds of an active domestic situation in which her children were running about and her husband
clanging and stuff,
bellowing and things like that. So that lost the entire narrative pretend structure that it ordinarily would have had, and almost is sort of like woman in relation to machine, and magical machine like that. It's almost like a a deus ex machina of a soundtrack just descending out of nowhere, out of the heavens. So I don't know, in that way I feel like Tearjerker was a kind of experiment that still fit within the working process. That it still kind of came out of my propensity to want to make a movie with all this intentionality, like here's the scene, because everyone know their parts, and this is going to be like a Hollywood thing. But even as such, it still got derailed. And it's also difficult for me to think of a repeat of that, though. Another structure in which that would occur. Anyway. Well, how about another one? Evil Cleric.
Well, that's a great example of that kind of appropriation you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
But also, it also kept its own integrity. It was like, that very funny bit about that one, I forget their names, those people that looked at that one, and it was some video festival.
Like Hometown USA.
Yeah,
not to mention names.
Not to mention any names.
Sponsored by the Alliance for Community Media.
And, it was like, I think the editing got very good marks.
The editing,
and there was absolutely no editing, so I don't know what that says about our particular editing capabilities.
But yeah, it is almost as like a documentary character. It is sort of the quintessential character of, again, found footage. I mean, there's sort of an editorial eye for the found footage that gets used, and that is interesting. But it probably is interesting to the folks out there that the soundtrack for Evil Cleric existed when, like 1984 or 85 or something.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
And wasn't finished or wasn't linked to that until 93.
I can't remember.
8 years waiting for something to go to it.
I can't remember what the original intention of that thing was. Was that like a performance audio?
Yeah, it was a performance thing.
What the hell was it used for?
I don't think he ever did it. I think it was going to be in the performance art class, but never got in there.
Well, Dream Catalog was, but I'm thinking maybe that was like one of the first things we tried to do on video.
Yeah,
because we shot that goofy thing and waking up in the morning with the alarm clock and
kind of going to work at the computer terminal.
No, wait a minute. Well, that's right, it was, because what was that Sentimental Philosopher thing was very similar.
Yeah.
But we did actually do that kind of rendition of Evil Cleric.
Yeah, we did it like 14 times.
I mean, we didn't...
getting up sleepy, going to the computer, cranking her up.
I was exhausted.
And then the computer turned into this kind of diabolical flash thing.
Speaking of diabolical flash things.
Lost. Oh, which gives me kind of an idea about, though I don't know exactly what you think of this, because it does seem like you are suspicious, to say the least, of pre-planned performances. It's involving words. No, involving words, because there was a strong early part of the work that we did really did have to do with you doing stuff, and that was conducting activities that were wordless activities. It wasn't like two people having some kind of theatrical or even filmically theatrical interaction. There weren't short vignettes of scripts, like Pranayama Sax, in which you breathe but do not play the saxophone, or Original Face with the marble drop into the glass. But I wonder, too, though, if that doesn't have a relationship to some sense of performance art stuff, in which one of the creeds that it seemed like we subscribed to a little bit is that performance art drew its strength from not asking the audience to pretend anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that the use, even when we deal with people as an illustrative component of our text work, as imagery, I mean, that's what people become. They become imagery. It's not like we've ever made an attempt to portray in all of its
sympathetic complexity, a human being on the screen, perhaps outside of tearjerker, which is almost like a caricature of a way of being, you know, a point of view pushed into a caricature like that. But that in most instances, there's no attempt, there's no reliance on the audience suspending their disbelief when they view our work. They're not watching a pretend instance between anybody, pretending to do anything. So that even when there are performers, they become these frozen actors, people that are sincerely performing actions in their lives at that time, whether they're captured in a home movie or what have you, and they're being appropriated and moved around in their sincerity towards a different end. But that's the only manipulation, so that the core of the action or the appearance is expressly genuine, because they are photographed with no particular, or videotaped with no particular purpose in mind, at least as far as our intentions go. Nor do we even, in most instances, videotape them with any intention in mind when we're videotaping them. That's still my ABX thing. Let me bring that up again. That to me, it seems like the elements of the abstract expressionism are working in this kind of intuitive way, right? An intuitive way, off the cuff, in hoping to capture or performing the work under a number of different mindsets and circumstances is sort of what we do. But the lack of indulgence and a certain lack of faith that we have in the communicability of the visual arts, you know, on its own level, this line is communing so much emotion to me, that we sort of believe that, we sort of don't, and feel like that needs help. Like there are elements of that are somewhat true, but to just do it and say, okay, here it is, you know, here's my spontaneous gesture laden with meaning that I can't put into words, that you understand, that you cannot put into words, is simply not going to work. Yet there's something there, and the elements that are there is relying on intuition, letting accidents happen, and then reviewing that whole situation and bringing the power not just of hindsight, but analysis and so on to them.
Well, I mean, it's got both aspects. It's both planned and unplanned, which is a comfortable way of working.
Yeah,
Very much so. To you know, take those segments and then you can really evaluate them, and then you can play around with them a little bit, see what you come up with, and then, you know, through various means of, you know, reshooting, juxtaposition in terms of editing, what you would stick next to it as an audio bit, all of that, you know, changes. It's like looking at a particular painting under, say, all green light, or, you know, putting a red light on it. You know, you can change it so drastically, and that change is entirely, you know, an intellectual process. It's choice. It's choosing.
right. That's quite true. And almost the editing, at least in its current constraint, you know, the data being difficult to locate and store. You know, there are some instances, I think, in which editing is kind of an intuitive process, like things are falling together and you're sort of grabbing imagery from the store. But almost the problems with doing that slows down the process enough that it's difficult to be intuitive for very long, because then you start running out of data, or you start looking for data, which is breaking the whole train of concentration and stuff like that.
Well, a lot of that stuff gets readjusted too, you know, after the fact. Like, take Girls Dream, for instance. That was just sort of, it started out just grabbing things off a particular tape almost in sequence, and then it was like, oh, I remember something here that might work well, and then you search for that, and you know, of course, the fact that the damn thing never got completely finished is, you know,
Oh yeah, it still sits there, isn't it?
is great evidence to the, you know, because it's like you have to get up to speed with spontaneity again. You know, it's just like, you know, forget about it for 6 months, and then happen to run across it. And, ooh, yeah, well, maybe I should work on this. But I mean, some of the images that have been inserted in there are, from so spread out of a collection. It's like a, gigantic supermarket with
the imagery, right?
and the stuff on just way spread out that, to even attempt to, that's probably why the damn thing's not finished, is because it just like, it requires getting the spontaneity up again, but in order even to proceed.
I believe it's rolling. Okay, I have this to say. I've decided about our method of working, and that is that we really loud. Do have to change the manual setting. Is that quieter? Quieter. And a little pre-roll. And I'll spontaneously say that I think that spontaneity has been an extraordinary important element to us, because whenever we do have resources, we tend to want to direct it at equipment in this gnarly high-tech world, at equipment that we can always have access to. We don't think of buying time at some kind of state-of-the-art facility. We think of coming up with as nearest as we can to some replica of this state-of-the-art equipment so that we can use it whenever the notion might strike us. So that things generally that we tend to plan, we also tend to forget, and that in process, things that we discover are the things that become our work. All right, and I'll ask the question. Oh yeah, do you have any influences which enter your work?
Well, I think I myself am particularly influenced by different forms, paradigms, if you will. Nothing specific, usually in general. Well, for instance, I always rather liked the form of silent movies. Can't say as I particularly, watch a lot of silent movies or anything. I've seen a few, but just the notion of having the text separate from the image, with all of the audio possibilities that, not having to match your sound with a particular environment, at least not, not in any kind of natural matchup. You could pretty much do anything you want with the audio. All of that stuff is very interesting as a form, and I feel that was sort of the form that the piece Living on the Moon took. It was basically some sort of hybrid silent movie form. It was very interesting as a form. I can't say as I was influenced by any particular silent movie, but I have been influenced by that particular form.
Yeah, what do you want? You want to just take pictures of...
Well, you do that, just take pictures of the paintings and have this
Yeah, okay.
going on.
Sure. All right. Do you work in any other medium besides video?
Well, I think there's always putzing around with tape recorders and things like that, messing around with music. Whatever. There was something I wanted to say there. I lost it.
Go ahead. Don't be shy.
Something about, I guess, when I first took up painting, which was a long time ago, it was sort of my first, validity or certification in terms of artistic output. It was sort of, I can't think of anything.
Stop it. I'll just say here some of Rick's paintings if you want to edit some stills of them on.
Some very bad ones, and here's some by Mike Flanagan. You've heard the story about this one, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
About this one was painted shortly after the Night o' Passion.
home.
What the Hong Kong princess?
The innocent lamb. I'm sure that's what was on his mind. Here's a painting not done by Rick, which, through the magic of editing, could be assumed to be one of his paintings. I think that would only be fair.
Okay, well, enough of this bonehead idea.
Okay. Wait, here's another one. Another Rick painting.
Watch your step there. Go get that crucifix, too. Just to your left there.
There. Yeah, there's some Rick painting assemblage. Angered a lot of people with this work.
Oh, the hamster was furious.
I'll tape a little here.
I mean,
Sure, I'd go back to that.
okay, like your schooling is somewhat film oriented.
Yes, it was.
Let's see, you went to RISD
Yes, that's true.
and
New York University Film
York.
School.
New York University Film School, in which you made 16 millimeter films.
I did indeed.
Family Eats Daughter or something?
Yes, there was the wonderful 1977 production of Family Eats Daughter, in which a small girl was suffocated by sandwich wrap as the denouement of the film.
So do you remember what the hell was going on in your head back then?
No, not very much. I think one
How old were you?
19.
19.
Can't remember very much, but it's true that by falling into the hands of gentle industrial giants, that I did work on language instruction films at a very tender age of like 19 and 20 for an unnamed distribution company, still very big in the academic market. And one thing I really did hate about it was that ruling by committee and then having people approve projects or disapprove aspects of projects and having 3 or 4 times more meetings about what was going to do than but then actually doing whatever it was one was going to do. That seemed to be quite a big film thing. A big film thing was to talk about a project for 2 years, maybe do a little bit for a month, and then talk about how the previous month went for another 2 years.
Oh, it sounds like heaven, really. Especially if you were getting paid by the hour.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought of that. But I must
Oh,
not
well,
have
you
liked
were
it.
young and
Foolish.
and idealistic, I believe the term.
Yes, idealistic. But I think that's probably true. I think I just wrote that today, or I wrote that earlier, like within the last month. I wrote something like, video art distinguishes itself from the filmic photoplay by virtue of its personal execution and intention. This notion that one of the aspects I don't think it's like an inclusive or defining aspect of art video, is that it can be geared to personal expression of statement, very much like the painter and his brush, the printmaker and his stippling tool, but that there's some sense of a kind of direct relationship with the artist, and there's like no need for positing this auteur theory that film had to go through, where people said, oh, film is such an extraordinarily collaborative art, how do we know who the hell is responsible for what goes on the screen? And it offended people's notion, I guess, that Western notion of the mastermind and the masterpiece. So, hence this notion of the auteur, that the director is the lifeblood of the film, and ultimately, and maybe for, the purposes of building a hero image, the artist is hero. And the artist as individual, they come up with this auteur theory. But I guess I must have subscribed to that, because I transferred from that school and went to RISD for photography. But you've never liked working in groups.
Well, no, that's not entirely true. I mean, like when I was 19 and 20, I guess my artistic expression, I guess it was, twofold. It was like on one hand, I was in like rock and roll groups.
Oh, right, a collaborative thing.
Yeah, in a way, although I think I tended to be, I suppose, take up that notion of being the director. It was like, okay, well, you can do this, so why don't you do that? And then the other fella can do that because he can do that, that sort of thing. It was, well, I was the same way when I was a goddamn kid, too. It was just always, I guess I was just sort of bossy.
Mandao, as the Portuguese would
Bossy,
say.
bossy, bossy. But, like, there was also, I guess at that time, probably my artistic interest as an individual, too, is more in the terms of literary. It was like, which is a very solitary thing. I mean, you sit down at your typewriter or whatever you use and just sort of pound whatever it is you're going to pound out. Yeah, it was like, crazy. I don't know, I think I was like, 21 or 22 before I ever had an art class.
Oh, that's right, you were a journalism major.
Yeah, I mean, like, I had no interest in it whatsoever that I could, that I can remember. I suppose maybe doing a couple Christmas tableaus in the 3rd grade or something like that. And I did get some severe criticism from a couple of my classmates for being much too derivative.
They're so quick in the 3rd grade.
Oh, they're mean.
Cynical, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder then how we would describe our collaboration. I wonder if it's the porridge that Goldilocks liked. Because it's not too big and it's not too small like that. I don't know.
Well, when you were just talking about the collaborative effort that's involved in film, I was thinking, well, okay, let's just say that we weren't collaborators and that we worked individually. Would we, still be doing the same thing? And I could see you going around directing people in your bossy little way. But myself, I couldn't see myself doing much of anything. I mean, I think it would be just a big frustration because, at the very least, it, requires 2 people, I think.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there are all
In
these
this medium.
there are all these aspects of working that even if it's only another hand, it requires somebody to move the camera and so on. Oh, not necessarily, I suppose. I mean, I imagine there could be an extraordinarily insular way of working that concentrated entirely, on individual perception. So one could just shoot footage of natural events and so on.
Well, I find a certain amount of comfort in the notion that there's at least another mind involved in the evaluation, because I mean, you can fool yourself pretty damn easily. You can.
As Dick Kiley would cry, deep in the mire of abstract expressionism.
Old Dick Kiley.
You can convince yourself of anything. This is probably true, particularly if you have a form.
Well, he was semi-living proof of it.
Flee from me.
But I think about I guess the artistic roots, because I mean, after all, it was graduate school in fine art that we first started messing around with this sort of thing. And I remember you almost painfully going through the traditional fine art route, getting the newsprint pad and the charcoal in your little corner, just drawing away.
Oh, yes.
Oh, it was very painful to watch.
in all the directions I would latch on to. Like when that wonderful TA, when we were doing couple drawings, two students drawing one another, and I was drawing someone, and TA came by and said, "You're not giving her enough head." I mean, her head is too small. What? She's not smiling?
You should have given her more head, evidently.
There you have it. Well, and I think that's probably, to a degree anyway, something that I found in our collaboration. I wanted something that had to do with this weird world of fine art. I was used to relying entirely on mechanical reproduction processes, like film, like video, like photography. And it seemed to me that behind the selection of this automatic character, there was a whole set of formal principles about which I felt I knew nothing, basically, and that the only way I would learn it was from the ground up, like going through the idea of drawing and using my own hand to gauge perspective and so on, none of which I ever particularly did with any
Well,
success.
I think all of us were most encouraging to you in terms of using the machine whenever you could.
Yeah, which I did. Tracings of photographs.
I mean, anybody can learn how to draw, but for some people, it's just a hell of a lot more work than others. And God bless you. Your eye-hand coordination in those terms was almost insurmountable.
Impediment.
Indeed.
I think something that I've come across working with you is the deliteralization of the picture. Because I think that, yes, I could see myself too, like running around directing people, but it would always be focused on some kind of theatrical characteristic, I think. Like I have no idea what characteristics of mood or setting would be, or ideas about the formal properties of the pictures through which these actors would be moving. I don't think I would have any sensibility or clue for that particularly. Or maybe it was something I felt like I lacked anyway. Well, maybe I will retry to do that definition of art that we noticed was so noisy.
Well, before you go into that,
Yes.
being somewhat prone to, or not I guess prone, but lately, thinking about this sort of thing and thinking about the good old days.
Oh, the good old days.
It seemed like one of the central enzymes, to this whole collaboration thing was the whole performance art thing.
That's true.
For you personally, was that a new thing, performance art?
Yes, it was a new bollocksing thing. Because
Back in '84.
way back in '84, I had done a performance that involved a sense of suspension of disbelief on the part of the audience. I'd really never done the performance art thing in our graduate station in life. There were two such proponents of this discipline, which is said to combine the worst of both theater and visual arts in one. And I was really castigated for inviting the suspension of disbelief from the audience. And it did knock me for a loop, because I thought, oh, well, I've acted in high school. That brought me lots of success. And I thought, well, what the hell can I do? And it's true that I went through that performance art class with a series of non-performative elements on my part. I invented group participation intervals, dopey machines. I mean, there was the pulley system that lifted the mattress out like a big snookering stool out of a wad of people that turned around being crushed against the mattress as it lifted out of
the lips of their compacted bodies.
It's causing great concern with the little weenie that
Oh,
you
yeah.
actually kill somebody.
When the pulley broke, it's fairly heavy. But yeah, it's true that I sort of came to performance art with performative expectations of a theatrical nature, and since we were charged with writing our own scripts, as it were, I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like, gosh, I can't really perform, because that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's true, that had a big impact on me. And it seems like partly the very early work that we did when we didn't even have an edit capability was based on the notion that there would not be a very strong timing relationship between the pictorial element and the audio element. And you were a very big one for gesture, for performing a deed within a kind of rarefied context, a deed of symbolic or ironic meaning.
Well, I think, most of those, probably the first couple of years, anyway, were filled up with basically video variations of, performance pieces that were done in that particular class.
Right, and in that style that did not proffer any suspension of disbelief. That it wasn't an instance of anyone acting, of anyone pretending they were somebody else doing something at a different time through which the viewer was privileged to see through some magic window, nor have any of the videos that we produced, with the exception of Tearjerker, been anything of that sort. There's never been any performative agent, except in the context I was talking about earlier, except in that context of absolute innocence, where someone is performing perhaps, but completely unintentionally. Someone's performing as a little boy who has a camera on him, but not like they think they're being part of some high art piece at the time. So that's interesting, and that's still an interesting thing about Tearjerker. And it's probably true that I still have some sort of unsatisfied interest in that direction, of using performative elements. And maybe that's why I'm so interested in equipment that would allow found recordings to be highly manipulated, so that there would still be some sort of distance, because they'd be treated as found objects, but they'd be fashioned. So it's still, it almost harks back to that very proviso of not requiring suspension of disbelief. Because in the only other instance, when in our work someone is moving their mouth and the words actually are synchronous to the way their mouth is moving, is in The Evil Cleric, which is pure documentation.
Well, you were talking about the innocence of intention, and, in that, I suppose, that appropriation that we sometimes use to, take something that was done in an entirely different context, like a home movie,
Right.
or, say, like Evil Cleric, with the gay demonstration, and then the preacher counter demonstration. All of that, say the original capturing has an innocence, which more or less implies as well a certain sense of honesty, that sort of not performing to a crowd, or to a specific, because the preacher guy was performing,
That's true.
the gay demonstrators were all performing their own little thing, and then we come along, we've got it captured on videotape, and then we do with it what we will, and through that process, that appropriation, we sort of make we give it a new sense of innocence, a new sense of, sincerity, I guess simply through that appropriation.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with intentionality, or something like intentionality. Like we'd have to come up with some way of dealing, if we were to pursue some scripted thing, like we had that Orpheus notion, or Oedipus Rex rather, retelling the tale of Oedipus Rex. I think we'd probably come up with a pretty wacky but interesting theatrical conceit about how to present people who are obviously operating from a script, people in a sense for whom we're pre-visualizing at the time. Because most of our we don't do pre-visualization, it's post-visualization. It has happened, and then it's selected for properties that were never ascertained at the time that this thing was constructed or happened.
Well, I remember you were talking about spontaneity, which is, that's definitely a large part of it, but that taking that, that stuff, whether it begins spontaneously or whatever, there is there's the other end of the stick on that. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do is really quite calculated. The manipulation, the appropriation of the original footage in its innocence is almost coldly manipulated. So it's like, okay, there is a high level of spontaneity, but there's also, I say the other end of the stick. There's a lot of calculation, which I think is part of the nature of the beast. You're sitting in an edit suite with your footage, you look at it God knows how many times, and you sort of refine its packaging, to, within a fraction of a second.
Right.
You're manipulating it. It's, I don't know, when you're editing, I guess there is some spontaneity to certain editing processes where you try something, or an idea pops into your head, like, well, maybe this section with the hand waving will work right here, and you try it, and you sort of jockey it around. I don't know if that's particularly spontaneous, or whether it's both.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like we have a kind of code almost about refusing, except in this mode of gesture, I'm thinking like really early work like Magic or Original Face or the Pranayama Sax or the what was that Easter thing? God, now I've even forgotten the.
Oh, I Love Easter?
Yeah, no. It had to do with the leaving of Easter eggs about by that disreputable figure. Roadkill. Right.
Mr. Scratch.
Yeah, Mr. Scratch. But they had kind of a performative element where it was scripted out, but it was a mute scripting. It was like the genuineness of gesture or the genuineness of activity versus the monologue or the scene.
Well, we always played around with that, especially, even in the early days. Like that Tantalos piece.
Oh, right, yeah.
And very, very strict parameters there.
Still relating to gesture. God, I'd forgotten about that. That is a totally weird thing. Must be lying around somewhere.
Oh, yes. C6 or C7.
See, now that would be an interesting thing to bring out interview-wise. So let's figure in 8 years, how many hours of tape do we have? We have, I have about 40 high 8 tapes, so that's 80 hours. We have about 35 VHS, so that's about 70, but I've got 8 hours of that Rec Lab thing. So that's 80, 70, 16 is 166. We have about
I've got 20 hours 8mm.
20 hours of 8
Or
millimeters.
20 tapes, I mean.
So that's 40, so it's like 196 hours of tape.
The original half-inch VHS camera tapes, I think we're up to 14.
Right, so another 28, so about 218 hours of tape, and then about 13 SVHS tapes. And I guess that's all original, because 3/4 stuff is all transferred, so 26. Right. Conservatively speaking, we have about 260 hours of videotape that we have shot with some sort of intention in mind, whatever it was, like, this is art, I'll take a picture of it. Something like that. So 250 hours, from which we have sort of produced, if we take into account the marathon and that they're half-hour sketchbooks, which number 7, possibly 8.
Possibly.
So that in 8 years, mulling over and ever accumulating, now numbering 250 hours of footage, we have boiled that down
4 hours.
to about 4 hours. That's rather remarkable. And that's a shooting ratio on the order of about 65-1. Something like that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of duplication, I would imagine, especially with reshoot. You know, like a lot of the V-tapes, a lot of the 8mm stuff is reshot. You know, different versions of other stuff, but you know, I can't imagine that being much more than 20 hours. So, ugh.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. 65-1. 8 years. 2 bald monkeys. So that is a curious methodology of working. It's true. Oh, and then I guess we could say something about the sketchbook versus the ordinary, or rather, the sketchbook versus the what's considered a finished work.
Well,
Because
yeah,
sketchbook stuff is still not considered finished. So from the 3.5 hours, it would be pretty frightening to try to determine what we actually thought was finished from that, whether it might be an hour or something on that order.
I'd say probably maybe 3 hours of finished work, you know, following that fine art definition, you know, where your sketches are, you know, studies of a particular project, a sustained work.
Yeah. But it's so damn modular, you know, compared to, well, I don't know, I don't have so much of a feel for even in the printmaking, painting world, I suppose it might be that same element, and that's where other levels of production, at least in the image world, do make people stop. Now, I don't know how other people work, but if people, for instance, are working on a fictional project or something like that, they might archive the stuff that they've done. But once you go through all the processes, and let's say you're in some fancy online studio, and you're making the finished piece out of the work, and then you've gone over it 501 times, and then you go in and do this final edit, that solidifies that work. You know, and then once it is broadcast or in theatrical film, once it makes its way through theaters and so on, it's over. It's just done. That was the piece of work. But on this level, you know, of exhibition and presentation, and also the technology that goes into finishing a work, it could pretty near never be done, because you could always say, I'm going to go back in and touch that thing up, put in a shot here or there, or that kind of thing. And it's hard to get a sense of closure on it.
Oh, incredibly difficult, you know. I mean, think about, out of all, you know, the 8 years work, those things that
way. And everything is sort of a piece of the work. I mean, every shot taken, I mean, like even this interview process itself is going to then be recycled into our available toolbox or something to pull out at some later date. So nothing, that is really strange, nothing we do is ever really slated for a particular piece, and that everything that goes into this weird, ever-replicating amoebic thing is just fair game within the ever-replicating amoebic thing.
Well, I don't know if I'd say, never, but certainly very, very seldomly. I mean, there are some things I think that actually were even successful, that were directly done for a specific purpose, and, just sort of, wham, bam, it's over. And it actually worked, mind you, very minuscule in terms of the rest of it, but it does occasionally happen.
Yeah, oh, I agree. Or that the
I can't think
foundation,
of what it might be right now, but
well, the foundation for a particular work might be set really quickly. Like that girl's dream example of being sort of an encyclopedic inventory of images that might fit the text. The formula for that succession of images, I think it started out with black image, black, and a kind of rhythm like that, was laid down really fast. But the work itself has been like 4 years or so in the making.
we should finish that one of these days too.
Yeah, it'd be nice to finish that one.
Okay, we're running.
Oh, all right. Well,
You were going to say something about
I was going to say something about the world of film.
Would you like to say something about the world of film with a 30th of a second shutter speed, or?
I suppose, I don't, yeah, if the background's not all washed out, that would be okay.
Oh, that looks better.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and this is what I was going to say about the world of film in this way, and that is outside of perhaps an industrial production house of film, which I seem to understand is kind of all over from the world of video, that video is much faster to shoot, evaluate, manipulate, that there are not reams of industrial or educational films that made anymore, nor do instructors or teachers particularly want to show film in classrooms. In fact, here where I work at the Crystal Theater, there are 2 school film projectors up in the projection booth, purchased for $10 each. They are so out of it. People would much rather show video. But anyway, what I imagine anyway, the underground film world to have been is an extraordinarily rarefied one. And I was thinking in terms of the short length of work that we do, work that's a minute perhaps to 5 minutes long, and just the physical sense of anticipation there must have been with short films in the 60 underground circuit or what have you. The threading up of the projector, the dimming of the lights, the hush of the crowd, the 1 minute, the film falling out of the projector right afterwards. I don't know exactly what it was like, but I feel like the video world, even though perhaps it has not hit any kind of pay dirt, is moving in a direction of delivery systems of the arcane, the obscure, the narrow cast audience with a slow but steady pace. There are hundreds of access centers, for instance, throughout the country. Offline is an example of an access idea that's generated out to now what seem to be a half dozen other cities. Our own small town of Missoula is also on the list. So in any event, one thing I have to say about the world of film is that I think, anyway, it was at one time an extraordinary, and remains today anyway, for small filmmakers, a very rarefied world that may be completely in the future replaced by high resolution video. And that might produce, interesting shift in the art world, in the sense of someone who gets to make feature films is sort of like the top dog, you know, the one that's clawed their way to a platform from which they can make a very big impression. And as an artist, it's true to me that it had always seemed a little bit attractive, the idea that if you made a big film, a feature-length film, then you had this national exposure if it took. But it seems like it would require putting so much effort and so much hope into a process that could so easily derail your personal vision, if not technically, distributionally, or if not distributionally through some collaborative problem or something like that. It seems like an extraordinary risk to take in one degree. And in another degree, if the resolution of video becomes such that it begins to approach that of film, then what does define the filmmaker with the feature film as the top dog distributionally? Okay, and then I'll just, just for heck's sake, give you the questions again. Well, how do you feel about video competitions, festivals, and the like?
Well, it seems like it's sort of the only game in town, really.
Okay.
I wish there was more of them.
Okay. Well, heck, let me check this volume again. Hello. Well, shoot, you want to tackle do you work in other artistic media besides video? One more time.
Why not? Were you going to ask me, or do I get to?
All right. Do you work in other artistic media besides video?
I suppose in a virtual sort of a way. I mean, I think I always look at stuff like a painter does, because that's such a strong part of my artistic makeup. And I think you tend to look at things more like a photographer, since that's a large aspect of your artistic vision, which of course is looking at things like a photographer. And the video medium is, I guess, a lot more simpatico than looking at things like a painter in the video medium.
Oh, why don't you say what we're supposed to be working on now? It was your baby to begin with.
Oh, you can't blame that on me.
Tell the people what it is. What's
We're
the current
supposed
project?
to be working on a project called Something to Do with the Weather, in which the effects of weather will be the common thread in... No, wait a minute, that's not exactly true. There's several common threads. I think the proposal was such that there would be a series of regional, in this case Montana, love stories in which the weather held a particular sway over people's emotions.
Do you believe that it would be invoked like music in a way that's difficult to describe?
Well, I believe that's how it was written up in the proposal. Yeah, it's... sometimes I panic on that. It's like, what in the hell are we going to do? But we don't need to talk about that. That way, I think probably the interesting challenge there will be the fact that this project is going to be a bit longer than we're used to. And hopefully it will have a consistency. Oh,
I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you go to the movies, how do you think does that have any influence on the work that we do? You go to a movie, you see a moving picture. Do you say, "There by golly, but for the grace of God"?
Oh, I almost wish you wouldn't have done that grace of God thing, because like recently I thought of a cartoon, I guess, with a punchline or something, about how it's usually, somebody in I suppose, a better position looking at somebody, say, in a wheelchair or whatever, thinking, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." I was thinking, imagining a situation where, say, somebody who's perhaps quadriplegic or whatever with an alcohol problem and all sorts of trouble, looking at, say, a couple of wealthy people dining in a fancy restaurant and saying, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." I thought that was kind of interesting, sort of almost anti-God in a way. Anyway, go ahead.
That's a good shepherd.
And the movie, okay, movies.
Yeah. I mean, when you go to movies, do you think, is there anything about a particular movie that you've seen that you felt really entered the work that we do?
Rarely. I think of movies as being an entirely different critter. I do remember specifically going and watching a movie that was sort of there were like little bits, it almost seemed like, that were kind of strung together. They made sense as a movie, but there's something nice going on in terms of these little bits. It was Full Metal Jacket by Altman, or not Altman,
Kubrick.
yeah. Full Metal Jacket by Stanley Kubrick, in which there were interesting little moments that struck me as, the kind of thing like, God, I wish, I'd done that. Like the jelly donut thing with all of the other people doing push-ups, the singing Happy Birthday to Jesus on Christmas Day. It was just lovely. It was, I related to that in terms of video art more, or not necessarily video art, but motion picture art, more than I would it did as a movie. It was just that these certain moments were so powerful that they obscured the motion picture itself, the full movie, which didn't really come through to me until about the third or fourth time that I watched it. But for the most part, I think of them as different critters, but it's more little moments that pop up in occasional movies that strike me as being similar to our intentions, which I think in a way we have very not necessarily small intentions. They're small time-wise, but I was speaking for myself anyway, that the intentions are very similar to those that I would take into making a painting of, say, something of I don't know how long most people would spend looking at a painting, but I imagine it to be relatively short. I can't imagine somebody sitting and looking at a painting for 2 hours. More like 5 to 10 minutes, if that. And I think that's influenced quite a bit my own intentions in the making of videos. The fact that I feel like basically what I'm doing is making noisy, moving paintings in a way.
I have a question for you.
Do you see humor as an element in your work?
Absolutely not. Why?
Wait a minute.
Why, yes, I do. That's a good, yes, I do. I think, for instance, but it's a sick humor. I think my humor, anyway, is kind of like a giggly little kid humor. For me, it's also, okay, this is another thing, for me personally, it is difficult for me to laugh. I suppose it could be a lack of generosity on my part, but for whatever reason, I think one of the things that motivate me to make video is that it's really difficult for me to laugh at other stuff. And the things that I laugh about most are things that I think are horrific, and then I try to reflect them in some sort of art form. And then when I see them subjected to my manipulations, or if I see the thing that I'm most afraid of that I've created and realize that I've created it, then I laugh and laugh and laugh like the innocent child. Like in Tearjerker, the thing that makes me, well, it used to, it's overworn, but the thing that made me laugh so much was the sight of that woman weeping away to this incredibly sappy, sentimental music. I would just laugh and laugh and laugh. Or the thing that we did with Siebert when he's crying out in agony at the bottom of those misty metal steps. And the camera's just moving away from him with all indifference and dispatch. He's just crying out, oh, it just made me laugh. And you remember, every time I saw that, I would just laugh and laugh and laugh. But I think it's that thing, is to be able to take the horrific, put it in some kind of canister, open your own Pandora's box, and see what frightens you the most, dancing to your own peculiar tune. It's an extraordinary release thing, and it makes me laugh. So I see humor as an element in our work, and with such dispatch and satiation that I don't care if other people do, and that's a failing.
Okay, in a similar vein, what is your definition of art?
Well, as I tried to say the other day in front of the adult bookstore, I do have a definition of art, and let's see if I can't remember what it was. I feel art ought to be an invitation for guests. And so in this form, the art can take many different avenues of approach. It can be entertainment, it can be the conveyance of a most personal and desperate plea or perspective. Whatever it is, it's a kind of interval where you anticipate that you're going to invite people into it. And in so doing then, you might have some kind of exuberance in this wild will to communicate, but you always have to remember that you're actually trying to do that, communicate. So art is like having guests in which you set up some sort of interval of sharing into which you've taken into account that other people are there too.
I had an old, actually I guess he wasn't all that old, painting teacher back when I was an undergraduate who used to talk about the occasion of art. He was hyper conscious of a particular specific reason why one would do it. You know, not so much that one is full of this need for self-expression, but rather, okay, outside of that self-expression, why are you doing it right now? Like, say, it's May Day, and you want to make a nice little thing for people to look at while they're running around the maypole or something like that. He was very into studying primitive cultures in which the occasion or the intention of a particular activity, which we in the Western cultures would look upon as being art or very similar, would for them to be something else entirely different, such as, like making their canoe go faster. And he thought that was a very important consideration outside of the the personal need for expression, which, seems to, I guess, have much in common with your notions of guests, art being an occasion to have guests come and look.
Yeah, I think I've been indoctrinated, it's true, into a view of art as this personal expression, but I've never taken that personally. But yes,
Let me ask again, does humor have any place in your work?
No, obviously not.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, I think I've got a bit of that personal expression, but not an extraordinary amount. That's true. But I've got a bit of it, and I feel like at least that is the driving form that people are going to recognize anyway. That it would be very difficult for people. People might minimize things that are produced for an occasion, I think. I think people might say, oh, you might entitle something for my son on his 12th birthday. And the cynic critic will say, oh, isn't that nice? Like the speech given round the turkey-laden Thanksgiving table. But that it might be more of a bric-a-brac, than a brick-bat in the eye of culture or something. So, yeah, I think, though, I'm thinking about that. When I think of this guest's metaphor, it does have to do with some kind of mediating process. And I think that does directly feed into, for instance, the length of the work that we do. That when I see other work that does extend itself and seem to presume upon the interest of the people experiencing it, it's shocking to me. In one way, I envy it. I envy the notion that someone could take an activity and engage in it in a sort of performative way for 40 minutes, let's say. And I do wonder what goes on in their mind. Like, what are the people doing whose job it is to experience this? But I think that does really inform, to a degree anyway, the duration of our work. That we are, it might be built into our own personal criteria.
Well,
but too,
I think it is, definitely.
But in the back of my mind, I would think, well, why in hell would somebody watch this water forming on a leaf for 6 minutes without an extremely good reason, context? The moralist said.
Do you have any influences which enter your work?
Gosh. Yes. But I don't know how they do it. I feel like I've got influences in the sense that, for instance, if I do a lot of reading, then sometime after that I find that I'm doing an extended, for me, amount of writing like that. I think I have a sense of, certainly my sense of musicality is extraordinarily influenced by outside sources. I hear something and then I feel absolutely that I want to replicate it, but my inability to replicate it leads to the gap between my intention to replicate something, especially musical aspects that I feel very influenced by. That gap is actually my creativity. That inability to absolutely reproduce a jingo that I really like.
So it's like sort of a subconscious digestion sort of a process goes on.
I feel like in a text way I'm really subject to that type of subconscious digestion, where I don't want to reproduce the written word, but I kind of find that it starts engendering all kinds of ideas that I have to re-express on paper. Musically, pictorially, yeah, I think I'm really subconsciously influenced, because I think to a greater degree than you are, I am influenced by the film form, and I sort of have a love-hate affair with it. And those images are so fleeting on the screen, they're constantly moving, that I feel like I am absorbing aspects of dynamic angle, aspects of some type of camera movement, which we first identified, for instance, just as in a specific example, when AT&T came out with the nervous handheld camera interview effect for the guy that bought the wrong phone system, and the camera was just jiggling about. I think we both pounced on that as this really palpable connection between anxiety and uncertainty, so that the character in this mode of anxiety and uncertainty was being reflected by the way they were being photographed, by the shaky, uncertain camera, for instance.
Well, I know I, more or less had the impression or the idea that some of the, formally speaking anyway, the most clever manipulation of image, movement, and sound does exist in the primetime commercials. I mean, there's some incredible formal techniques, the manipulation of people's minds that, art, fine art would, kill for. It's just, quite unfortunate that the content of most of that is simply crap.
Yeah, some of the bigger, but I think it's really changing so that some of the bigger concepts, the concepts are still crap, and the direction from which they're coming from is highly suspicious. But let's say AT&T's new line of futuristic commercials grafted right off of Until the End of the World, that kind of fashionable Wim Wenders version of the 21st century is in there, with people calling their babies, turning on their lights on their desert houses from a moving train, and having their barefoot meetings from the beach with the home office gang. But that AT&T commercial is pretty remarkable, and so is Microsoft's Where Do You Want to Go Today? There's now two versions. There's the real stylized, stolen from Wim Wenders, classical black and white Western Europe statue version that moves through Mongolia over to Asia, sits somewhere in Singapore, and then bounces back to a farm in Iowa or something like that. But I think that's also a very interesting form, that perhaps commercials are really the cutting edge, also in terms of a linearal. Let me try that again. I think commercials really are the cutting edge in terms of a decomposition of the linear line. That commercials, there are the commercials that set up the little storyline, but there are those blowaway commercials like AT&T and Microsoft are running that are made up of fragments of images that sort of give you the feeling of a dream sequence or a highly active dream sequence in which you're popping all over the world. And they're selling technology through this thing. So those commercials themselves are more fit to the short attention span. They fit more to a kind of postmodern, if you will, fragmentation of information, dare I say it, but it's there. And to the shortening of attention span, the notion of channel surfing, and also this kind of pastiche of available imagery, and that the mind is able to make half connections and is fairly satisfied with this. I mean, maybe similar to kind of a Rauschenberg notion of making paintings that are designed to be looked at over the shoulder as you're moving away from them. That impression, when built upon with enough premeditation, can actually disrobe itself of all of the bad and shallow things impression has come to mean. And that impression, made one after another, can actually equal experience and meaning of some substance.